Florita, please, you can start. Florita, please, you can start.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Can someone hear me?
We can hear you. Please go on. I think we lost you, Florita. Richard, please get in touch with her. She's gone. And so is the... Okay.
Good morning. Can someone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go to the first slide. Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Good morning, network.
Florita, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning. We can hear you.
What's the problem that I can't hear anything?
We can hear you, Florita.
Hello, good morning. Can anyone hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you clearly.
We can hear you.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
You're welcome to the
Your slide is not up. Your slide has gone off.
Oh, that's why I'm trying to connect back.
Okay.
Okay. Just give me a few minutes. Let me see if the slide can come up. Okay, while the slide is while the slides is trying to come up, I want to welcome you to the maiden edition of the ethics training for CSOs 2026. So for this training, we are going to be engaging once in a week to learn and share experience on research ethics and also making reference to live experiences with the conduct of research and ethical issues as it affects us in our different countries. A quick look of NHVMAS, who we are, what we have done in the past in the field of ethics, and then dive into the presentation for the day. Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much for the slides. All right.
You have to give me instructions as to when to move the slides, please.
So once again, as I said, we are just going to take a little stock of NHVMAS, who we are, what we have done in the past in the field of ethics, and why is it imperative that we build the capacity of civil society organizations as well as advocates to support ethical conduct of research in our various countries. So let's look at the history. How was NHVMAS evolved? In 2023, please, the next slide. In 2023, a group of committed advocates, they came together to crystallize the New Light Advocacy Society. Basically, at that 2003, that was the early stage when HIV prevention research, and they felt there is a need for active participation of Nigeria as a country, as well as Nigerians, in the global effort for the development of HIV vaccines and microbicide. It's also interesting to know, as early as that 2003, NHVMAS have already identified ethical imperative in HIV research and development as an issue they want to pursue. Permit me to mention here the founding mothers and fathers of our great organization, NHVMAS. Professor Moronike Opon, at that time, championed the HIV vaccine agenda for NHVMAS, and also late Mr. Falobi Omonolu of blessed memory championed the microbicide agenda. So NHVMAS was looking at promoting vaccine and microbicide research. But it's interesting for us to know that NHVMAS has evolved over the years, and we are now looking at integrating sexual reproductive health into the vaccine and microbicide research agenda. So what's our vision? Thank you, Ma, for the slides. Stay put there. So the NHVMAS vision is to see a Nigerian where new biomedical HIV prevention and reproductive health tools are readily available to its citizens. And our mission is to reduce the spread of HIV and other infectious diseases in the society through the availability of safe, effective, acceptable, and affordable health tools for all. So in 2017, next slide, NHVMAS initiated what we call the HIV Prevention Academy. So this HIV Prevention Academy is focused on empowering diverse population and groups on biomedical HIV prevention tools, research, and development. So some of these trainings include the annual media training for journalists. Every year, NHVMAS identified 10 journalists, and they engage them in training on biomedical HIV prevention tools. The same applies for the social media influencers. If you go to NHVMAS, so Facebook and other social media handles, you see a lot of work, a lot of advocacy campaigns that have been developed and pushed. That's courtesy of our engagement in social media influencers. And also the Great Learning Champion Mentorship Program that identify young people, youths, and empower them in a 6-month structured training. We also had the evidence-based advocacy training for CSO so that they can use research evidence to engage stakeholders for the desired change. And we also have training for advocates on HIV prevention advocacy. So they key into the global agenda of ending AIDS by 2030. And now we have the annual ethics training for CSO. This is the maiden edition. We congratulate everyone that is joining into this edition. We are going to be learning from the group and eventually evolve this agenda. So let's look at NHVMAS engagements in the field of research ethics. It's interesting to know, as I mentioned earlier on, that ethics has been the primary agenda of NHVMAS, ensuring the ethical conduct of research in Nigeria. For this, NHVMAS has acted as watchdog to ensure the protection of human rights of research participants, especially in the field of HIV prevention research and development. It's also interesting to know that over the years, NHVMAS has built both local and international partnerships for the promotion of research ethics. This includes, as early in 2010, our partnership and engagement with Sedaction France, the EDCTP, EVAC, ICAT, Bioethics Society of Nigeria, National Health Research Ethics Committee, HETREC, NACA, IVN, and NIMA, to mention but a few. We have other larger engagements, continue to push the agenda of research ethics. So let's look at our development milestones. What are the milestones that NHVMAS have developed in this field? First is the development of a community research training manual. We call it the field guide. So this guide is developed with low literacy to support training and community understanding of research and ethical imperatives. The guide has 11 modules, and what is listed there are the topics for the modules. Next slide. We also have next slide, ma'am. We also have, through the funding support from Sedaction, conducted a lot of training for ethics committees. First is the training of laypersons on protocol review process 2010. We also have the training of the IRBs or the HETREC on monitoring of researches 2009. We also did have training of the chairpersons on the ethics board on good participatory practice. Also, training of the IRBs on community engagement. So we have just, if you look at that piece, that is the action piece, why some of those trainings was happening. So we also did receive funding from EDCTP to support training of IRBs or the HETREC on protocol review process. NHVMAS built a lot of partnership with local HETREC and support them to be trained on research ethics, protocol review process, and also work with them with the National Health Research Ethics Committee to get them registered and approved as a body that can review protocols and also give approval. So the picture also shows a picture of the on-site training that happened during these periods. So our ethics engagement evolved into the conduct of annual bioethics training forum in partnership with Bioethics Society of Nigeria. The first edition of this conference was held in 2016, supported by NHVMAS, and consistently this conference has continued to run. This 2026 will be the 10th edition of the Bioethics conference. So the pictures also shows the participants at this meeting. This is an international conference that also attracts partners outside Nigeria, both Europe and other African countries. So let's go to the business of the day. Next slide. Research ethics training for CSOs. Why the need? You agree with me that research ethics is critical if we must advance health research and development. You can't pull out ethics from clinical trials and other research conduct. So ethics is very important. And also we, civil society organization, we are gatekeepers. We are critical stakeholders that should promote ethical conduct of research in our communities, within our constituencies. So we should be able to promote human rights, promote participant safety, and uphold integrity of research process. And of course, we can't be able to deliver on these mandates if we don't have our skills and capacity developed. So on this grant, NHVMAS have expanded its HIV Prevention Academy program to include annual trainings, annual ethics training for CSO. we had a very large volume of application, almost 247 applications, and NHVMAS felt the vast number of these applications and other public actually need to benefit for this training. And because of that, we have adopted live streaming of this training on YouTube so that we can reach the larger public and build capacity and knowledge around research ethics. It is also important for you to note that our HIV Prevention Academy is also tailored towards the goal of achieving an AIDS-free generation by 2030. And you know that research and development is key to achieving AIDS-free society. Hence, the need for us to advance research ethics. So it's on these premises we have done this investment to see that CSO's capacity are built and they support that agenda. So what is the goal? Next slide. What is the goal of this training? The goal is to for the ethical conduct of research in Nigeria, in Africa at large, including specifically HIV research and development. Our research ethics, including the ethical review from the lens of the community. We want to empower CSO to support health research and development from an informed perspective. We also want to see CSOs act as watchdogs that will be able to promote ethical conduct of research in your country, promoting human rights, participant safety, and upholding the research integrity. The target for this training is civil society organizations as well as advocates. So we could see journalists that have worked as advocates in the field of research also participating in this training. As earlier said, the training will run for 4 weeks, 4 weeks, once a week engagement. However, we have a 2 weeks period that participants can take up a community research ethics project of your interest based on what is applicable in your community. And then thereafter, you'll be able to teaser the report and submit to NHVMAS. Successful applicants will be given a certificate of completion. If you did not complete the process, you will not obtain that certificate of completion. The mode of training, of course, is virtual training through Zoom, as we are having, but live streaming through the YouTube. So what are the activities of our ethics training? We had the first step, which has to do with the successful applicant takes up the virtual training. We did a call, we received a lot of application, reviewed it, and successful applicants are engaged in the live sections. Then others, we join through the live streaming on YouTube. So these trainees, they take up a 4-week structured training with once a week attendance. Then the trainees will identify and implement community research ethics projects of their interest, specifically addressing research ethics literacy. Then they develop their reports and submit by the 6th week of this engagement. Successful applicants are issued certificates of completion of the training. So on that note, I want to thank you for being part of this process, and I hope we are going to learn from one another and be able to share agenda. Thank you so very much. On that note, I want to invite our lead facilitator, Professor Moronike Opo. Over to you, Ma. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Florita, for that recall of that beautiful history. I don't think, like we all do in Africa, we never properly document our history. I think that's a beautiful way of documenting and getting it in the public space. There's so much that has been done over almost 16 years, at a time when nobody knew the importance of research ethics. So I congratulate all the 25 applicants who got selected for the one-on-one engagement. Congratulations. This is the beginning of many things. I felt very excited when this finally got rolling. Not that we haven't been doing it before, but in this manner, in a way that it becomes open and accessible, irrespective of granting. I celebrated NHVMAS for doing this. I'm also celebrating every single one of you on YouTube that are there right now and that will access the training later. This, for me, is a life-changing process. Research ethics is a life-changing process, actually. It's not From my own experience, it's not just that you know something. You can know something and it's different from you. You know chemistry, but it doesn't apply to your everyday life. When you get involved in research ethics, it affects your everyday life because you understand the morality and the issues around morality much more deeply than conventionally. So congratulations, everyone, for being here. In the next few minutes, quite a long, many minutes, I'm going to engage with you. I'm going to guide you to see why you must be involved as advocates and CSOs. You must protect our community. And the people that protect the community is not the scientists. It's not the researchers. It is we, civil society, guarding the gates of the community we serve, ensuring that it's the right things that are made accessible to them, and ensuring that what we learn through research becomes applicable and translated into actions. What you've seen over the years in the HIV field is how community advocates had guarded the enterprise. In guarding the enterprise, they were actively involved in the design of research protocols, such that it was the development of research and a research agenda that addressed the needs of the people. And that changed the paradigm in the field because whatever the research output that came from that research was immediately translated into policy and immediately made accessible to people because the design was immediately user-friendly. This is very much unlike the history of research when we had female condoms and it was on the shelf for God knows how many years, as long as maybe 40 years, before it gradually started trickling for the use of people. HIV changed that field. And you know what? Didn't only change that field, it's changed the field of other disease practices, leading the way: TB, malaria, sexual and reproductive health, where the community becomes central voice in the design, implementation, dissemination, and uptake of research. Where there is poor uptake of research, it means you're not seeing advocates' voice in that space. And please note that globally, the voice of advocates is very much recognized. It's called voices. It's an indicator of country progress. It's called voices. Voices. And you find that where the voices are not heard, where the voices are not moderating the things happening in research, where the voices are not moderating the government's action, there tends to be abuse. We're going to see what happened, why research ethics had to evolve. Because when it wasn't existing, abuse happened by research, in research. So let's journey with me through this 1.5 hours meeting with you. I think it's going to take that long this first time, so that you understand why you have to be in that space. You're in the research space. Please note that there's clinical practice as different from research enterprise, and there are ethics governing research, and there are ethics governing clinical practice. The one major distinction that we often make, our group working together, it's been a large group over the 13, 14, 15 years we've been working on this. The major distinction we made of research as well as clinical practice is the emergency. Research is not an emergency. Clinical care can be emergencies, and there are always emergencies. There will always be emergencies with clinical care. However, with research, there is no emergency. There might be a need to fast track. There might be a need to make the process faster, but there's no emergency, which implies that you have to understand what it is and all the principles guiding research, and therefore make sure that the principles are in place. So when we say research, what is it all about? First, it is a systematic inquiry to improve knowledge. We'll talk about it. There's a systematic. That means you are doing things by a process. There's a process guiding research. It is structured. You must follow the rules. And when you're inquiring, you're asking new questions. There's always research gaps. There are questions that need to be answered. And it is this new question that you must find. what we still don't know. For example, lens has come into Nigeria. What we still don't know is how to effectively ensure that this lens gets to every eligible person, irrespective of their designation. For us, that is a question. You develop an hypothesis, you test it, you analyze it, and then draw evidence-based conclusions. Your conclusion is not expert opinion. It's not I think. It's not I guess. It is proven by research and inquiry that was done through a structured process. It was systematically analyzed. And what happens in this process is that even as you answer one question, another also arises. And that gives us a continuous cycle of inquiry, driven by critical thinking, driven by creativity. What applied before COVID cannot stay applicable in every sphere after COVID. So what do we need to do differently? What happened during Ebola cannot be the same after Ebola. So what do we need to do differently? In this new age of AI, what does it mean to do things differently in the health sector? What does it mean to do things differently in the community response? What does it mean to do some things differently with the HR Prevention Academy? These are curious things that are critical thinking, creativity, and allows you to draw evidence to make conclusion, including this piece of work. That's the first time it's happening. What are we going to gather? How are we going to gather information so that the next edition next year will be done differently? We do research all the time. How much Maggi do I put in stew? How much salt do I put in stew? Where do I go to get the cheapest basket of bananas? Where do I go to get the cheapest basket of tomatoes? Which route takes me shortest to my office? These are all research-based inquiries that we do every day of our lives. All we're saying is that when it comes to people's health and wellness, it must be systematic. It must be documented. It must follow the process that is already laid out for this so that the evidence becomes applicable for every generation. So when we talk about research, which is the primary enterprise of the academia, but like I've noted, it's beyond that. It is the heartbeat of the nation. And you'll see where you become critically involved as a community advocate. There are people whose job all their life is to do research, people in the academia, people in the research industry, people like those in the universities, in Nigerian Institute of Medical Research and the likes. That is their work. You must, as civil society organizations, must know a little about what they do so that you can validate if the evidence they have generated is valid. And your work is to take this piece, what the result they've done, and push it into policies, push it into programs. While they're doing that work, you're looking into it and ensuring they're not exploiting people. And you'll see why in a minute. So when they're doing their research, they're pushing the boundaries of what is known, and they're training and teaching the next generation on how to think and what to think about. They question norms, and that is why culture is not static. Because when they question norms, research will enable us to know what is right and not, like the female genital mutilation. It's a cultural norm, but research has shown us that it is a practice that we need to change and drop. And there are many norms, many things that has become normal. For example, for a long time, we thought we should only eat eggs once in 2 days or 3 days. Now, it is now known that, no, you can eat every day. Of course, you must eat with moderation. You question norms. Why must I change my toothbrush every 3 months? Why must I go to the dentist twice a year? Why must I, when I'm in the dentist, use warm salt and water when I do an extraction 8 times? Is it possible to do it 4 times and get the same result? You question norms. And this way things change and get better, all towards improving the health and wellness of people. And these are all intersecting with the community advocates' mission. Research is not separate from your mission as a community advocate. It's the foundation to strengthen your work in the community, because research provides you evidence for your advocacy action, one, and it provides you evidence for the service you do for the community. You know what is optimal, and therefore you drive what is optimal. You understand what drives infant mortality. You therefore act in the community to reduce infant mortality. You understand what is causing problems and making um, adolescents continuously exposed to HIV. In Nigeria, HIV infection is decreasing in every population except the adolescent population. Once you understand the evidence on why this is happening and how to address it, you carry it as service into the community. So you cannot do without understanding research and being part of it. So now let's define research. Once again, I put all I've said together. It's a systematic, which means there is a process to it you must follow. Two, it's a rigorous investigation. It's not a child's play to conduct research. You don't wake up today and go into the field conducting research tomorrow. That's why it's a little bit different from understanding the quantity of Maggi or salt you put into the pot of stew. That is research in itself, passed from generation to generation. Some of us with the smell of the stew, you know that the Maggi is enough. Some of us with the smell of the soup, you know that it is cooked. Some of us, you have to see it, and some of us have to taste it. But when we're doing research, there is rigor to it so that we can establish that, yes, we have either generated new knowledge to address what we did not know at all, or to validate what we already know and say it's still valid for use. For example, is the way we engage with our CSO work before the COVID, is it still making impacts after the COVID? Is the way we engage with Gen A, is it the same way we're going to engage with Gen Z? The way we have been doing advocacy work with Gen D, is it still valid and making its impact with Gen Z? So that is validating existing knowledge. But there are also some knowledge that is new. How do we cure breast cancer? It's going to be new. Cure. How do we cure HIV? It's new knowledge because it doesn't exist. But for antiretroviral drugs that is already existing, how do we get this drug to the hands of underreached population? This is not new knowledge. We're trying to validate what we already know amongst the general population for vulnerable populations. Okay? So once we're talking about research, it's once again a simple, carefully organized way of finding new knowledge that can help many people. Hear me there. It must help many people. We're not doing research that will help 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. It must be generalizable. The result can help people beyond just those that took part in it. In your research, you will recruit a representative population. There might be 100, 200, 500. These 500 people, when we take the results to the 3 million people around the world, or the 3 billion, or the 15 billion, or the 30 billion people, is it still applicable? That was what happened with your Panadol. It worked well with a few. Then we moved it up. Can it work well with so many other people? That's what happened with antiretroviral. And you see that it continues to change and improve as you're starting to understand how it can be better generalized, used for different populations, and made it available for Africans and Asians and Europeans and America. Your results must be generalizable. Like when you study malaria prevention in your village, is it possible for this malaria prevention knowledge to extend beyond the immediate village? That's how you design. I might do the study in Ile-Ife where I am, but can it also be used in Oshu, Ilesha, Oshobo, Ekiti? then it is generalizable. Otherwise, you have to do things in a way to step it up. Of course, when you do it in adults, it may not be generalizable to children. Then you will have to design a study that makes it generalizable to children, because of the dosage of drugs might differ, because the physiology of children might differ, because the way children behave might differ. Okay? If I'm communicating with anybody there, would you like to give a thumbs up so that I know I am speaking and engaging with you? Very good. Thanks you. Thank you, Nasha. I hope I pronounced your name well. Nasha. Thank you. I'm glad I'm communicating with you. Any other person I'm communicating with, it would be nice to have a thumbs up. Very good. All right. I'm communicating with Udi. Udi. That's nice. I'm communicating with Gloria. That's nice. Thank you. So why in all this did ethics have to come in? Why in all this did we have to now bring in ethics? Can't we just continue to do research? This is why ethics come in. And you'll see that your work is defined by understanding why ethics has to come in. Because research is about data. Hear me loud and clear. Research is about data. People run after data. Researchers run after data, run after data, run after data. Titus, Jonathan, are you hearing me? The way to bring in the human aspect to research is by this ethics. And this is why it is your concern. You might not understand all there is about the data collection because it's really systematic and they have their rules governing there. But you as civil society organization must understand the rules involved in human engagement in research. You must understand the rules about ethics because you are the custodian of care, of human rights. It is not the scientist that is the custodian of care of human rights. It is the civil society. So you must keep an eye on that human element in research to ensure you protect their integrity. Now let's go through the history of research. Research has started forever and ever and ever. The first research that was officially recorded was in 1747, the first clinical trial, and I'll explain why. In those days when sailors used to sail, they used to come down with a lot of scurvy. And of course, like it is in many areas, they'll say, take this and try it, take this and try it, try this. But then the sailor, Leeds, decided to evaluate the use of fruits to treat scurvy. So he took 2 groups, sailors, 6 that's the fruits that had scurvy and 6 that didn't have. And then they identified that for those taking the fruits, they were able to treat scurvy. That was the first clinical trials that ever was recorded. There might have been some before then, but the first recorded. And I want to emphasize here, I'm sure you all know, what is not recorded is not done. And that is the problem with our history in Africa. We don't document and therefore we lose our history. Please, for every one of you here over the next 1 year, document the history of your work in your organization and put it in the public space. So Linda's recorders are the first person ever to do a clinical trial. Maybe there have been others before, but his work led to also understanding the treatment of scurvy. Later in 1841, somebody also documented their work. The first notice, this was not any intervention. The first thing they did was notice a difference in the rate of puerperal fever and death between 2 clinics. And so this guy, Ignace, decided to look and document what was happening in these 2 clinics. One clinic was recording death rates higher than the other. And what he noticed and concluded from observation by looking at the data was the differences in the practice between the clinic run by obstetricians and the clinic run by midwives. He did his observation over 5 years. And he noticed that the clinic run by obstetricians, the obstetricians used to wash their hands with soap before they take delivery, unlike those by midwives, resulting in less death by those by obstetricians and more deaths by those by midwives. He established something by that observation, but he did not end there. Later, he now did an intervention where he now added chlorinated lime, Okay, that was what he observed. He showed that using the chlorinated lime to sterilize the obstetrician's hands reduced the rate of puerperal fever. He then went on to do an intervention where that place, the midwives that weren't sterilizing, they started sterilizing their hands with chlorinated lime. And then their own death rate then went down. So you see that he observed and then he applied the knowledge. What are we saying here? As advocates, you must change the paradigm of what is happening in many African nations when results are done and they're not translated to practice or policies, because they just stay on the shelf and nothing is done with them. That is not impacting life. However, people started pursuing systematic research. Remember what I said. Researchers run after data. Researchers run after data. They are careless about the use of humans. And in the process of running after data, they sacrifice humans in the pursuit of that knowledge. It takes people who are overseeing the human angle that ensures that in that data pursuit for knowledge, used to pursue knowledge, the human angle is not lost. And this was the point of change in 1987, when somebody announced, Sanarella actually, that they had discovered the cause of yellow fever. And how did they do that? They infected 5 people with the yellow fever virus and said, Eureka! Now we know the virus that causes yellow fever. So they infected this person with this virus, infected this person with this virus, infected, and the 5 that got the yellow fever virus that they were suspecting got yellow fever. And it was Eureka. Then there was nothing to it. Now you can say what? And I tell people the way you say what, when you hear this kind of story today, is the way, if we're not careful, in 100 years' time, people will read the things we are doing and say, what? How could anybody do this? So in 1898, Oslo then condemned this. How can you deliberately inject poison? Because yellow fever then did not have a cure. Anybody that had yellow fever died. So what they did with this experiment, and it went on into 1901, when the US military were injecting people to establish research, to establish the treatment, they'll inject you, and then they'll give your family gold because you're going to die because there's no treatment. So they give your family, for those of you that came to volunteer for not that they get volunteers like that as it is known today. And then they give your family, because when you die, you get the gold. So like this young man, you have to think seriously about what this means. So in 1898, Oslo, condemned this kind of action. How do you deliberately inject poison of non-high degree of virulence in a human being that, yellow fever is going to cause death? When the person did not sanction it, he said it is criminal. It is criminal. And so people started to look at this criminality, which led to the United States Congress making a declaration of the Bill 3424. Until today, US is known as the father of bioethics. Bioethics evolved in the United States, but now we have to contextualize many of these bioethics principles that evolved from the United States and contextualize it into our own context. And a lot of work is already going there. That's why the Annual Bioethics Forum, which NHVMAS was very, very instrumental in setting up in 2016, becomes very critical for us in Nigeria. For those outside Nigeria, you must find a way of instituting practice. South Africa is doing well. Malawi is doing well. Kenya is doing well. I think Uganda is also doing well. So you must see how to ensure your country, these principles are contextualized for your own countries. So, because of this problem in 1990, the US Congress set up the Senate Bill 3424, where it was required that every investigator must disclose in advance the purpose and procedures for their non-therapeutic experiments involving human beings. It means you must write a protocol. You can't wake up and just decide to do a research without writing a protocol. That's how you disclose in advance. Remember, before advance means before you do the work. What is the purpose of this research? What is the procedure you're going to use? Whether you're doing a clinical trial, whether you're doing a behavioral survey, whether you're looking at how teachers teach students, whether you're looking at how the environment is cleaned, you must declare this by a reading protocol. So the bill explicitly banned experiment on people that otherwise cannot give consent. You can't do experiment on infants. You can't do experiments on children under the age of 21. Remember, at that time, age of consent was 21. Now it has been reduced to 18, and you can't do experiments on pregnant women. This bill of 19,000 has since extended even until now, and we are trying to work onto how we undo it. You would learn a little bit more about this going forward, because when you do not experiment safely on pregnant women, what happens is that there's no data on how things work on pregnant women. And yet pregnant women do get sick or heal or have to get involved in medical therapy. But when you continue to exclude pregnant women from research, we don't know how it works. And that's how it has worked with children. Because we do not involve them in research, what you have is that when you have a dose, they will tell you, take half the tablet, take a quarter of the tablet. But it does not always work that way all the time. So there are a lot of things happening in recent times on how to improve it to ensure that not only do you collect consent, but you also ensure that people are involved appropriately. You hear me use the word consent, consent, consent. Please hold it tight. I'm going to teach you on the slide about what consent is all about. And you, civil society organizations members, must look, this is one prerogative that is yours. And I'll talk about the problems we've had with the civil society up to date. Furthermore, in 1938, the Food and Drug Cosmetic Acts of the US also noted the need to put instructions of use on the packages. Some drugs were designated as prescription only, where you cannot get it over the counter, and you need a prescription to be able to access that. Some you can get over the counter. Whatever it is, there must be description on the packages. And before any drug or food gets into the market, they must have been tested for toxicity, whatever they are, whether they're herbal products or not, whether they've been used for generation or not. Once you want to get them on the market, toxicity profile must be understood and known, and this information as per the directions for use should be on the package. And now we came to the point changer in history. The point changer in history. In history, you would have heard about the Nazi war, where Jews were set up by Germans to be eliminated. And therefore, there were lots of Jews in the concentration camps. And then you had physicians, doctors, who now came and said, look, these prisoners of war, they're going to die. We're going to kill them anyway. Why don't we generate data from them by using them, hear me, by using them in research? Please know we don't use people. But that was the thought then. Rather than waste these lives, why don't we use them for research and generate data that we do not know? And then they did horrible research. They would drop people in ice water and look at them. How long does it take them to freeze before they die. They will shoot them on the legs and say, look, how does the bone shatter from the what velocity of the gunshot shatters, and in what direction does the shattering happen? Horrible experiments. And I'll tell you a few as I'm going on. And so in 1946 to 47, they went through trials. Guys, when I teach this with humility. Do you know that 23 Nazi medical personnel were caught up in that trial, and some had to die because of the horrible experimentation that they went through, that they took people through? Now read this with me. If you are there, read the headline. 1, 2, go. 1946 to 1947. Prosecution of 23 Nazi medical personnel. Excellent. Read the last 2 words. Medical personnel. Excellent. Now, let me explain why I said that. These guys are medical personnel. They took the Hippocratic oath as a medical personnel to protect the life and dignity of human beings. So they know what it means to protect life and dignity. They took a medical Hippocratic oath. They are not devils. They are not black people. They are not white people. They are medical personnel who knew what it means to save lives. But rather, in this case, they did horrible experiments. This is why I repeat again, that when you move from clinical care into research, you're taking a different breath. Because in research, you are looking at data. They are running after the figures. They are running after the data and what it has to say. They oftentimes forget the humanness of the people generating the data. This is where you, as civil society and people that are trained in bioethics, have to shine their eyes. They have to take on the elements of the human being in that research and be sure that human safety and dignity is protected. These are some of the experimentations that they were doing. Survival time after parachuting people into the water of North Atlantic or immersing people in ice water. How long does it take them before they die? Some people were kept outside, unclothed, unsheltered in sub-freezing temperature for 12 to 14 hours. And then you measure the body temperature, the body physiology, what is happening. Other victims, they just stay there and spray water on them, feed people with salt water, see what happens to their body chemistry. And no attempt was made to relieve the suffering of those people. Because why? They were going to die anyway because they're prisoners. We're going to use them to collect data before they die. Or was it gunshot injury? You shoot people and say, what kind of shattering happened to the bones? What kind of bonds? What kind of amputation should we do? What kind of biological exposure causes a kind of wound? When we stab people, what kind of dressing would get healing? These were things that were done to people's life. Why? Because we were using them to generate data, to save others. We were using people that were going to die. Because of this horrible crime, the Nuremberg Code was formulated in 1946 to 49. This is the first code governing ethical practice of research, because it became clear that something needs to guide the safety of these humans involved. It needed to be more than they say. It has to be written. And one of the things that was written is you must make it absolutely voluntary for anybody to participate in research. So you as civil society must be in that place to ensure voluntariness. And there are many, many ways of withdrawing liberty from people indirectly if you are not in that space. For example, I'm sure a number of you might have been to the university. And in the university, you take your attendance, class attendance. And then a lecturer comes and says, oh, you can do this voluntarily. I'll give you questionnaire. Okay, just take this questionnaire. You don't have to, if you don't want, don't do, class captain, at the end of the day, please give me the number of people that didn't attend the class. And then, of course, you would feel it, not because you want to, but you know that this person is going to know. When he matches the number of questionnaire he gets and the number of people that were not in class, he knows that some of us were here and did not feel it. That is not forcing you to be voluntary, but it's coercing you in a soft way to make sure that you do it. Or you tell a person that you recruited in a research study for the use of antiretroviral therapy and says, hi guys, this is an antiretroviral therapy that is not available in the country. So somebody comes from the global north, brings this 5th generation antiretroviral to study this in Malawi. And he says, oh, you are free to withdraw from this study anytime. Guys, will this person withdraw? No, he can't withdraw because he's supposed to be on antiretroviral therapy all his life. Once he starts this therapy, he's going to have to be on it all his life. He cannot withdraw because it has no place in the country to collect this drug. So he's going to stay on that trial for as long as it is, no matter how they are treating him or her, or even when he wants to withdraw, I can't because I have to be on antiretroviral therapy all my life. What are you doing as civil society to ensure that that research, the way it is designed, does not take away the liberty from participants to voluntarily participate or withdraw at any time? This is one of the many things that were in that Nuremberg Code. Later, having said that, we got into the era of the Nuremberg Code, the other things that happened, which was the thalidomide study. But in the thalidomide era, what happens was that drugs that were not recommended or tried for use for a particular situation was used. And I'm sure a number of us, we know this kind of things. Thalidomide was never designed, studied for use for morning sickness. But people started knowing that when you use thalidomide, it reduces morning sickness, and they were giving it to pregnant women without doing the trials. At some other time, we'll teach you about trials. Please note that in the WhatsApp chat, they're going to give you a link to the WhatsApp group. If you're part of the 25 that were, your application was successful, please click the link and join the WhatsApp group. We will continue the conversation in the WhatsApp group for the next 1 week before we go to next week. So what happened with thalidomide? The children started being born, and then they started seeing birth defects. If they had done this trial, done preclinical studies, done phase 1 studies, done phase 2 studies, done phase 3 studies, which is the procedure for developing therapy, drugs, they would have picked this if bad defect very early and they would never have used it. But because they did not do clinical, they just took the drug. You use paracetamol. I have headache, take paracetamol. I have stomachache, take paracetamol. You are just self-recommending drugs. This kind of thing happened. And so thalidomide caused birth defects. And that led to FDA noting and demanding for data before any drug is used for anything in humans. I make this noise because many of us as civil society advocates will ask for herbal therapies to just be used. Now, they have been using this therapy for 50 years since my great-grandfather was born. Why are you asking for therapy? This is the kind of thing that happens because there's no documentation of what was done. You therefore do not know the safety profile. You do not know the harm profile. To assume that all herbal therapy is safe is wrong. Herbal therapies can also do harm. We need to know the level of harm and how to take precaution against the harm. Yes, every biomedical drug has harm, but them tested, they know the level of harm, and therefore they regulate the dosage based on harm. That is why all therapies that go into human bodies must be tested and have evidence. Okay, that was what led to this, the thalidomide study. But then, despite the regulations, you can see all the regulations that has come. FDA has regulations. Nuremberg Code has regulations. This guy then studied. Professor Henry Baccia, publications in top journals, top global journals, and noted that despite the regulations, bad research practices were still ongoing. And for many of these, we were using vulnerable populations. Once again, and I'll tell you one of the stories, that we're still using vulnerable populations, very elderly, soldiers in the armed force that cannot say no to their commandants, people that were terminally ill, people that were alcoholics, children, mentally retarded. These are people that could not speak. This is why you as civil society must be in the space to speak. You become the voice for the voiceless. You become the voice for people that don't even know their rights. This is your primary role as civil society. You can take on several secondary roles by providing services. Your primary role is voice. Remember I said this at the very beginning. Your primary role is voice. You must speak up for people that can't speak. You must speak up for people that don't know. Not everybody has to know ethics, but you that know ethics must stand in the space. And this is one example, the Willowbrook State Study. In the Willowbrook State Study, what happened was that children that were mentally retarded were housed in this place. And it was a dirty place. It was a dirty place. Children will poo-poo all over the place. Children will crawl in the poo-poo. And because their hands are all in the filth, they put it in their mouth. And so they were having hepatitis B infection. What this researchers now did was that they had a very clean environment, a very clean part. And now said, people who want to be in this house, if you bring your baby to Willowbrook and you want them to be in the clean house, you automatically must participate in a research study. Isn't that coercion? Isn't that coercion? If you agree with me, it's coercion. Let me see your electronic hands. Isn't that coercion? Who would not want their baby to be in a clean place? But the only condition for you, thank you, Abdul, for you to be in that clean place is by agreeing to be in a research. That's coercion. Those people agreed. And what he did was that he studied the natural history of hepatitis. You know what? Even though you now went into the clean place, he fed you with hepatitis. This researcher fed you with hepatitis and then studied the natural history so that they can get data to be able to develop their vaccine. So this was what he did. Newly admitted children whose parents consented to be in the place were given intramuscular injections of hepatitis or milkshake of hepatitis so that they get infected with hepatitis. And its justification. If they had gone to the other house, they would have been, they would have gotten hepatitis by their unclean place. That was his justification. And guys, till today, he's still defending his career. He continues to defend that study. But there were issues around informed consent, about coercion, about study design in an era where you knew that gamma globulin could be given for protection against hepatitis. You withheld it. That's a crime. There is also the Jewish Chronic Disease Hospital, where elderlies were injected with liver cancer cells just to be able to see if it will establish, if I inject you with liver cancer cell, will you get liver cancer? Okay, and they did not collect consent, despite the Nuremberg Code that said consent must be gotten. They said we don't want them to be anxious. We don't want them to have anxiety because they don't know about cancer. Then they withheld consent. And of course, the unethical stories of syphilis. Your assignment today, and you're going to take forward into the group, is to read about the syphilis trial in the US, where people And this was the critical problem that causes Blacks in the US to stay away from research. What happened was then people, Blacks were recruited into the study. And listen to me, they recruited Blacks by Black. They use the Black nurse to recruit Black people. The way they use civil society organizations to open doors into communities. Researchers come into the community. They cannot enter the community except you, civil societies. Open the door for them. You know, the worst thing, you will carry them on your back and you'll be going into the community because the community trusts you. But you open the community to abuse. This was what this Black nurse did. It wasn't the white man that came. It was the Black nurse that went into the community. They recruited people. Why? They wanted to study the history of syphilis. What was the crime? The crime was that when the penicillin was discovered as a treatment for syphilis, they withheld it away from these people. And for 40 years, they were studying the history of syphilis and keeping these people away from accessing treatments. That was the crime. You cannot be involved in a research when there's treatment and you keep people away from accessing the treatment. What you can do for that study is to do a superiority design or a non-inferiority design. Ask me on the platform, what does this mean? You can either do an inferiority design or non-superiority design. Ask me on the platform if you don't understand this, but you must read as an assignment. The syphilis study. Did you know that it took Clinton, it was in Clinton's time that they had to apologize for the abuse that was done by the public health institution of US itself. So when you receive protocols from US, Europe, high-income country, don't assume it is clean and safe. Despite the fact that US is the home of bioethics, they were still committing crime. And it only came exposed in July 25, 1972, that there were still these people that were kept away from treatment. Please note that the study in US had people who got infected with syphilis recruited. But then they later discovered that there was a study going on in Guatemala, and it was only discovered in 2011. Maybe for some of you, it's a long time ago, but for me, it's still in my lifetime. Actually, I met this woman who did the discovery in Harvard, in one of my travels to Harvard. It was accidental discovery. Archaeologists reading the records of the time. And in Guatemala, you know what they did? They infected people with syphilis. In US, it was those that had syphilis they recruited. In Guatemala, they infected people with syphilis just to get the history. That's why it's called ethically impossible. How could have imagined it? Guys, it happened. And so because of all these horrors, in 1974, the National Research Act was created. And the Belmont Report came out in 1974. And these were the the three main principles that was generated. Anytime you do research, you must respect persons and the community. There must be evidence of beneficence. There must be evidence of not doing harm. And there must be evidence of justice. I'm going to take you through that. Guys, on this platform, this is your Bible. For Christians, they have Bible. For Muslims, they have Quran. For you on this training, these four principles and how it operates is your standing operating procedure. This is the lens which you are going forward in the next 3 weeks. Let's go through this one by one. Before we go there, if there's anything you have learned, these are the 3 lessons that were taken forward and is making you responsible as trainees on this platform. 1, despite the evidence I've shown you that there's regulation, it did not curb unethical behaviors. It did not curb. Even the best of brains publishing in the topmost journal around the world, as Henry Becker noted, they were still doing unethical things. Therefore, guys, nobody is above unethical behavior. I showed you with clarity how US is the home of bioethics, yet as at 1972, they were still having unethical practice. Guys, regulations cannot curb unethical behaviors. It is monitoring that keeps it in check. Therefore, there must be people who enforce regulations to make it work. and you will be seeing some of these cases. IRBs, institutional review boards, are very important, but you as civil society, for those in Nigeria, please note that the country places the highest premium on community members as regulators of the research space. On every constituted ethics committee in Nigeria, there must be a community member. That meeting of the ethics committee is invalid when the ethics committee member is not present in that meeting and when the lawyer is not present in that meeting. Any meeting held by an ethics committee board in Nigeria that does not have community member there and the lawyer is an invalid meeting. This is the premium placed on community members because we know that you as community members hold human rights as the center of your activities. And therefore, once you understand the principles governing research ethics, you are in the best position to see that it is applied. And third, the lesson you've learned is that ethics behavior is not inborn, you learn it. So also you must learn how to regulate ethics behavior. So now let's go forward. Oh, what happened? Okay, so what is research ethics? It's about knowing the difference between right and wrong. It is different from the law. When you break people's human rights, then you go into law. But that's the problem with ethics in itself. It's morality. It's difference between right and wrong are defined by different populations and different communities. That is why you must be present so that you know and define in that research in your community what is right and wrong. In the North, it is wrong for a male doctor to see a female patient. That's a community wrong. In Southern Nigeria, in Lagos, it doesn't matter if you like, a man can look at a woman can look at a man. It's not an issue. But in the North, it's a cultural issue. And therefore, when you design your research, you must ensure that it's a woman looking for a woman and a man looking for a man, not the other way. These are the things around ethics that makes it right and wrong and is context specific. So research ethics are about the rules that protect the right, safety, and dignity of anyone that participates in research. And without ethics, research can cause harm. 1, to people, and 2, it can exploit the communities. So let's go into the details. When we're looking at ethics, we're looking at integrity, we're looking at morals, we're looking at honor, we're looking at choice, we're looking at responsibility, we're looking at conscience. It's a morality thing. It's not a legal thing. And that's why when you look at the scale of ethics, right and wrong is balanced. Unlike the law, if you look at the scale for law, the right is up and the wrong is down. It is not balanced. In ethics, this balance. Because what might be wrong for you in one context might be right in another context. And it is the recognition of this imbalance that makes ethics a conversation that allows you to reach consensus in taking a decision. But in reaching that consensus and taking a decision, all the stakeholders that will have to have their voice in that place has to be there. And therefore, when you as community members are not rightfully holding your space to ensure that the voice is heard in that space, then we have a problem. And we can tell you many success stories that has happened in the Nigerian space because advocates held their voice up. And in holding their voice up, the right things were done. Otherwise, we would have had exploitations of humans. You would learn about that as we go on in the ethics space. So once again, we're going to go through the 4 universal principles. What does respect for persons and community mean? What does beneficence, which means do good, mean? And what does non-maleficence, do no harm, mean? And what does justice, which talks about fairness, mean? Now go with me through principle 1. Respect for persons and the community means every person has the right of choice for themselves. I have a right not to join the research. I have a right to join and live in the middle. You must let me know everything about the research to enable me make a decision about joining or not. You cannot force me, and you should not force me, be it directly or indirectly, into any research. You should not be tricked into a research. You should not be pressured into a research. Anyone can say no, or I can withdraw at any time without the consequences of being punished because I withdrew. That is what it means to respect. And when it talks about the community, it means understanding and honoring the local values, the local people, the local voices. Your research can change the local practices, but you must design your research to fit the local practice. You cannot change the local practice because of your research. The outcome of your research can change local practices, but your design must honor local practices. So you must honor the local traditions, the local leaders, and you must involve the research in decision-making, not just individuals. So just wake up and choose this person because it's your friend. The fact that the committee says don't do this research today doesn't mean you go back to tomorrow. You must help them understand. Let them hear, let them know. And when they understand and ask the question, then you can go forward. You must be patient with them in understanding. They haven't taken ethics training before, you have taken. They haven't taken research training before, you have taken. You help them get on board. And once they're on board, they take informed decision about their participation. And that process is getting consent. Consent is getting an approval to go ahead. So when an individual, you don't get consent for an individual from the community, you do a one-on-one engagement. That's what this picture is showing. It's a one-on-one. You cannot consent, you can't get a group consent. There's nothing so-called group consent. When you go into the community, which you will do in many African communities, you have to get to the leader to go into the community. What you're getting is permission. It's not consent, it's permission. That permission might be given to you in a written letter. Once you get permission, you go and collect consent one-on-one from the participants. And the participants must be a competent person. He must give the the consent voluntarily after receiving adequate information in a language that they understand. The four goes together. This one person that you're going to go to face, you will explain, ensure that they get adequate information in the language that they understand, so that they understand the context. Understanding is the main root of informed consent. It's not that you shared information, no, it is that they understood. If this person goes to court and say, I did not understand, you will go to jail. Informed consent is not just sharing information, it's getting the competent person to adequately understand after you have made the person, you've explained in a language that the person can understand, and you have assessed that this person understands before you get the signature. The fact that this person signs or thumbprints and this person can tell you that I don't understand, it is not consent. A competent person also is very important. What do you mean by competent person? A child may not be able to understand what you're talking about. That is why the parents or a legal authorized representative will stand in the place to sign a consent form for a child. But in Nigeria, once the child is between 12 and 17, you must get assent, written assent, in addition to consent from the parent or legal representative, which means that child also agrees to be part of that research. There's assent because that child has developed cognitive ability enough to do some understanding and therefore will be involved in the process. For those of you on the WhatsApp group, I would share with you a comic on how assent is obtained from children. Okay? And then if the person, remember it's competency, if the person has disability and can understand, you must have a legal authorized representative helping the person. If the person is unconscious, there must be a legal authorized representative to be able to give the consent to enroll that person in the study. You must ensure adequate information. Adequate information is legally defined. It's not you to define it. In the Nigerian regulation system, there are elements, 12 elements that must be in the form consent before you can say there's adequate information. Language of understanding is very important. Whatever community you go, ensure that the information is written out in the language so that every time it's applied consistently. You do not verbally change English to a local language. The local language must be written so that every time you're applying it to 2,000 people, 100 person, 10, you're applying it consistently. If you leave it to your head to be changing, you're going to be changing it differently from every person, or translating English to local language without the written content. This is for respect one. Now let us go to principle two, beneficence, do good. This means that research must maximize benefit and minimize harm. Every research has harm. There are 5 different harm. It can be physical harm, it can be emotional harm, it can be social harm, it can be financial harm. Financial harm means people are spending on your research. Nobody should spend a dime by being involved in your research. And a typical example I give is in many studies when residents or doctors are doing research. They would ask patients to come to do tests or come back for reviews without them giving reimbursement. For example, I came into your hospital and I'm doing malaria research. I came into your hospital because I have malaria. But you as a medical doctor are interested in looking at if malaria also affects the chest. And then for your investigation, normally if I'm going to do an investigation for malaria, all you would take is blood samples. But because you're interested in seeing if malaria affects the chest, you now ask for chest X-ray. That chest X-ray is your cost as a researcher. But oftentimes in abusive communities, you transfer the cost of that chest X-ray to the patient unknowingly. That is an abuse. The second thing that might happen is that if I have malaria normally, I should come to the hospital today, and in 3 days' time, I come for my review. But because of your research, you need to see me every day. You ask me to come every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, which is beyond the normal time. You do not give me transport reimbursement for those visits. That is transferring the cost of your research to me as a study participant, and that is an abuse. There are various ways that this abuse is physical, emotional, social, and financial happens. So once you do research, and I'll give you a life story here. When we were doing in Nigeria many years ago, we were doing the behavioral BSS, what is it? Behavior and Biomedical Sentinel Survey, IBBSS, Integrated Biological and Behavioral Sentinel Surveys. That Sentinel Survey includes vulnerable populations, female sex workers, people who use drugs, as well as men who had sex with men. There was this young guy that had been living in that community for years, who was a gay guy, and the community had lived successfully in that community with no pressure. Because of the IBBSS, he was traced to his home and he was recruited for that research. What then happened was they linked the IBBSS research to him and automatically deduced that he was gay. He came back from work and his life was threatened. His home was opened, his properties were dropped outside, it was burnt, and he had to run for his life. He had to leave the country immediately for safety. I know the story because I was personally involved in it and had to contribute money for his personal ticket, his flight ticket, to leave the country immediately. What has that done? That study, yes, could maximize benefit for the whole because it's telling the country about the prevalence of HIV and in vulnerable populations and where to concentrate their resources. But the practice of that research brought harm to one person that I know, and it might have brought harm to many others. Therefore, you must take cognizance of the research you do in a way that the design and its implementation must minimize harm as much as possible. And where there's harm, there must be things in place to address the harm. Also to note that when you're maximizing benefits, it isn't enough for you to open the doors of research for your community because you civil society organizations are doorkeepers. It isn't enough for you to open the research doors into your community so that people can come and collect data. It is very important that after they've collected data, you must negotiate with those people to ensure that the knowledge is returned so that the community can use the knowledge for their good. What has happened over the years is many researchers take away the data, they go to publish, they get promotion, they go to publish and go to conferences. And the indigenous knowledge holders are left behind worse off. I continue to criticize university communities like mine, Obafemi Awolowo University, that is in a host town, where despite the fact that this university has produced 2,000 professors and more, the university is not better in all its indicators, health indicators, education indicators, is not better. All we're doing is exploiting. And then meetings like this also celebrate Kilifi, which hosts KEMRI, where the health indices in Kilifi that hosts KEMRI is better than every other community that doesn't host Kilifi. So you as a gatekeeper must ensure that the research that you do must better our community. And that is why Boston, that hosts universities like Harvard and Massachusetts, top universities in the world, are better off. They're better off than other communities within the US. You, as gatekeepers, must ensure that your research gives back. A brilliant example is what is going on in the University of Ibadan, and that Dr. Asuzu, Professor Asuzu, initiated, wherein students that do research will go back to that research and disseminate the results so that the people can use the results and better themselves. What we do as researchers is take the data, go away, and go to conferences and leave nothing for the community left behind. The opposite, not opposite, the reflection is non-maleficence. First, to no harm. We appreciate that all research may not always bring direct benefit in the immediate, but whatever it is, whether you're bringing direct benefit or you're not, please ensure that no harm is done. You should not injure one person for the good of the majority. This is the difference between ethics and public health. For public health, once the majority is okay, then they are okay with the rest. And it's the same with the problem that I personally have with the HIV agenda. With the HIV agenda, global elimination is targeting 95%. Once 95% people are free of HIV, the rest of 5%, well, you're okay. But I tell people, especially in the country where I come from, when you calculate 5% of the population of Nigeria, do you know that 5% is bigger than the population of Botswana, bigger than the population of Lesotho, bigger than the population of Namibia? The 5% population in Nigeria is bigger than many countries put together. But then that is the role of civil society. You must stand and push the drive. For many places, it's not 95, 95, 95, it's now 99, 99, 99. But then the 1% who's looking after them. You do not sacrifice one person. That's the difference in ethics. For the rest of the others, you must make sure that this one person that might be injured for the good of the many is also cared for so that the injury is minimized. It is never acceptable. That is what it means for community advocates. To harm a few for the benefit of the others. You cannot sacrifice the vulnerable for the greater good. This is where you shine your eyes, because you must see that the few that would experience harm, once again, there's no research that is free of harm. It doesn't exist. The harm might be minimal, moderate, or high. There's no zero harm. You want to ensure that you ameliorate the harm as much as possible so that they are kept well as heroes of research. And four is justice. This is the one principle that is often abused. It means we must share the burden and benefit fairly. Burden includes the risk, the time, and the discomfort. And the result that comes out is new treatment. Many times in the past, or improved services, or better knowledge. Many times in the past, what has happened is exploitation continued for long, for justice had been unfair. For example, hepatitis research was actually took place in Africa because that was where the burden is. But the results and the benefits went to Europe, and it took over 40 years of the pharmaceutical benefiting from the result of that research before hepatitis vaccine came into Africa. Till today, hepatitis vaccine is not widespread. But that was exploitation. That was we Africans taking the burden of the research and the Europeans taking the benefit of the treatment. The same thing could have happened with HIV treatment if it was an advocate standing in the space and shouting and saying, no, the burden is in Africa. The research continues to happen in Africa because the burden is in Africa. Where the burden is when you design studies, the time to conduct that study is less. But if they did not stand in that space, the Europeans that come into the country to do the African treatment to take the data and go. And the pharmaceutical industries will continue to make the drugs available in the global north because that's where they can make their profits. The profit is not made in Africa because we are designed as poor people. But we are very resilient people and we have not learned to sell our resilience. So you do not. Also, it's the same thing, like I talk about contraceptive studies. You find out that people would not recruit contraceptive participants in Victoria Land. These are rich places. They would not go to Banana Island. These are where the rich places people live. They have high walls. They have dogs. But you will go to Ajegule where you ask people to come and queue up for 100 naira and you're going to have 4,000 people queued so that in 2 days you collect your data. But you know what? When that result is housed, it's the people in Victoria, the rich people that are going to use contraceptives. So you have used, once again, the burden is on the poor and the benefits on the rich. This is what we're talking about justice. You must be sure that the people that will benefit from the research are the ones involved in the research. And this is the reason why you cannot recruit prisoners, except that study is designed to improve the wellness and the well-being of prisoners. You do not recruit people because they're easy to recruit. You recruit people because it's the population that will benefit, and you must ensure that the benefits too gets to them. You heard me talk about vulnerable populations. What are vulnerable populations? They're poor people, they're elderly, they're homeless, they're prisoners, they're people with mental illness. In our community in Nigeria, or many communities in Africa, vulnerable populations are sex workers, men who have sex with men, drug users. They are vulnerable because they can, if you do harm, for them, they can't go out because the law is against them. The law isn't against you conducting research among vulnerable populations, but the law is against them as human beings. And therefore, if you do any injustice, they can't go to court. They can't go to court because the laws have made them invisible. People living with HIV are also vulnerable. Women and children are vulnerable. And what this means is that when any research is conducted or planned to be conducted among vulnerable populations, you must give special attention. Amongst ethics committee, we say, shine your eyes. The protocols are not reviewed as normal protocols. The protocols are, you spend time with their protocols because they're special populations. And what do you do as CSOs? I'm going to round up in a few minutes. Please note that your role as CSOs cannot be overemphasized. You must protect our communities from exploitation. You must ensure that the research that you open the gates to is not just about extra data. It is the study objective. Ask them. The study objective says ABC, and the question is doing EFG. You're just mining data for the community when it's not answering your research question. You must ask. You must hold them accountable. You must ask questions. And if there's any questions you're going to ask them where's the ethics clearance. We have seen this happen over and over in Nigeria, where gatekeepers, community gatekeepers that are trained in ethics, stand their ground and say, where's your ethics clearance? And that shuts them out. In Nigeria, and I give Nigerian examples, I apologize for other people from other countries, we have seen so much research that has been done without ethics clearance. And it is the CSOs that lead these researchers into the communities. You cannot open a door without ethics clearance. Ask, at the minimum, where's your ethics clearance? At the minimum, you as the gatekeeper must read that protocol and look through the shined eyes on the ethics element and be sure that this research is not exploitative. It's not going to take away data and it's not planning to come back. It must plan to come back and disseminate at the minimum. So look at the following 10 things. When you read the protocol, you must be sure that the question has value and usefulness for your people. This is not data to be taken to America. This is data that at the end of the day answers the question for the people. There's fair selection. You're not cheating. You're not coming to pick on the vulnerable population because it's easy to get there. Benefits of that research must outweigh the risk, and the research method must be flawless. That is why you need that ethics clearance. You must get the ethics clearance because any research must have an ethics clearance before it comes to the field. You must ask for the informed consent, and you must ask how they are going to recruit and how they are going to implement the informed consent process. You must ask. You must ask about safety for your participants during and after, not that they abandon the participants after they have left. You must ask about the researchers and their competency. Are they trained to do this? Who are they? You must ask. And of course, you must ask about sharing the results. Once you have found the finding, before you start going to your conferences, when are you coming back to the same community to disseminate the results? You are now looking for me to get the participants for your study. Make sure you come back to me to look for them for dissemination because they are reachable. And above all, no shortcuts. They must follow all these 9 principles. And you, the CSO, are the one to ensure it happens. Of course, researchers may be ignorant about ethics. You ask them to get training and transparency. Any research group programs that you are getting involved with, ask them to get competency. They might pressure vulnerable populations to join the study. You, as CSO, must monitor and speak up. Speak up because you have competency and you have been trained. They might not give feedback to the community. This is very common. Negotiate before you go to the field that they must provide feedback to your communities so that people can use the findings to make changes. And what still, there might be local ethics committees that are not competent. This is your voice. Go knock the door and ask them, you guys are giving clearance for studies that are bad. I have received 2 studies from your ethics committee. It is poorly designed. Why? Knock on the door. At worst, go and report them to NREC, the National Ethics Committee, who is coordinating them. Because what we've seen is many local ethics committee in Nigeria and not all in I don't know what it means in other countries, but for example, in Nigeria, they are not getting their accreditation. They are supposed to get accredited every 2 years. But they do it once and they go running for 10 years. They don't update their knowledge. So here you are, CSOs, guys, I'm coming to an end. Learn these principles, teach them. That might be your community service. The community itself, teach them. Ask questions when researchers come to you and your community. Be the gatekeeper you're supposed to be. At the minimum, request for the ethics approval letter and demand for community feedback. If there are ethical behaviors, report to the National Ethics Committee and build partnership with ethical research and university. Oh, volunteer to ethics committees and say, I'm trained. This is the value of the certificate we're going to give you. Tell them you're trained. You are willing to serve on your ethics committee as a trained person. Okay, in conclusion, research ethics is not just for doctors or scientists. It's a tool for you as CSOs to protect the community. Ethics is community power for protection. And when we understand what they are, you demand for what is right and you ensure that the research serves the people and not exploit. So research is about us and it cannot be done without us. On that note, I want to say thank you and I hand over to Florita to take questions. Florita and Rita.
Thank you so very much, Ma. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm sure everyone is clapping for Prof. You really dived into this so great, taking out from history to the basic principles and what we should do or look out for as CSOs. Thank you so very much. I'm sure the training is really thought-provoking and people will have questions, concerns or contributions. So we're going to keep the floor open now. If you want to ask questions, kindly indicate by raising up your hands and then you have the floor. If you have questions, contributions, concern, please raise your hand up and you'll be called to do that. So while we are waiting to have people's hands raised up, Prof, I have a question. You talked about clinical care ethics and research ethics as 2 different dichotomy in terms of practice. So, and oftentimes we do know that clinicians do wear the cap as researchers.
Yes, please.
So my question is, how does a clinician draw the line on clinical care and research practice? And how best can this be communicated to the participant, especially in a society where there is a lot of therapeutic misconceptions. Once they see a doctor or a healthcare provider, they think they are getting all the care without knowing that some of these things are things that are subject to clinical trials. So how best can we be able to communicate this and draw that line? Thank you so very much. Please do raise up your hands and then ask your questions.
I think you've asked a most brilliant question, a most brilliant
Yes,
question. And this for me is where the project that people have has to start. It's about empowering the community. There are two things that happen with researchers being a clinician, being a researcher, and recruiting their participants. One, in this community, even for educated persons, the clinician, we live in an hierarchical society. And so the clinician has power in place of hierarchy based on knowledge, and then also has power because it's a physician. That power makes their researchers subject to them. Even if they're doing the research and they're doing the right thing, you see that they would just give consent. And I'm not saying this because I'm thinking, I'm saying it because I've done an evaluation within the system. And it is bad. It is bad in practice. We'll talk about practice as we go forward or when we get to the platform. That change can not only happen when you continue to teach people about their rights. Once they know their rights, Nigerians are bold, they will ask. The second thing I also want to add to this is also the fact that many times, even you as CSOs, you go into the community and bring research as if you're doing service. You're doing research, you're collecting data, but what you do is present it as service. Or come for free cervical screening, come for free HIV test, and then you're collecting data for research because you're working with a research organization. And this exploitation happens because you don't get consent from them. So maybe we'll hear from others, Florita, how they think this can happen. But I have seen, and you, Florita, we have seen in NHVMAS, you should share examples as you're doing the case studies, how trained community members are served as gatekeepers. And they protect their community members because they ask questions once they're empowered by this kind of training. I'm sure during the case studies, she's going to raise up a number of excellent examples we have seen in the field. It changes paradigms. It changes paradigm. And this thing we've seen it from the north, Kano, we've seen it in the south. Where is this girl? We've seen it in the east, we've seen it in the west. Everybody may not know, but the gatekeepers must be empowered to close the door from unethical research, and people can have the right to ask questions in a way that it protects them from the self. The more we do, the better we'll be. Thank you for asking that brilliant question. Over to you, Florida.
Thank you, Ma. Any more questions? There should be one from the participants. I need someone to build this, our great group. There must be. Okay, Anna, okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so
thanks for building the cards.
Thank you so much. Based on informed consent, I want to ask, in Nigeria, where many participants may not, fully understand research, how we can my question is, how can we ensure that informed consent is truly informed and not just formality? And then number two, I want to ask, how do we handle cases where participants agree mainly because they believe the research is linked to probably government or financial benefits?
Well, thank you very much. And you asked two great questions. Informed consent, two things. Every research, there's a gatekeeper. Every research that happens, there's a gatekeeper. There are gates through which people come in. There are gates. There are gates. Somebody must open the door. IRBs can open the door. Community CSOs can open the door. People open the door. Community leaders can open the door. I think for me, it's not possible for you to go to every 250 Nigerians to educate them. But you can identify during your project critical community leaders that needs to be educated. It is this community leaders that will ask the questions about the informed consent because they would know what to ask. Once researchers know that they are being watched, they sit up. What we're doing here is also minimizing. It's not going to be completely eliminated, but we can minimize the abuse. Once people know they are being watched, they will sit up. Once there's one scapegoat, they will sit up. So in your attempt to address this, it's get the community leaders to understand the importance of that and the minimum informed consent and what they should be looking for. Of course, once the gatekeepers know this, they also will talk about it. Community members will report to them. Remember, your community leaders include church leaders, imam, Muslim, mosque leaders. These people must be empowered with information, basic enough information to take the right decisions for their people. It's not going to be zero, but yes, we can reduce the abuse. People ask questions. Nigerians are very smart, at least that I know about that. You asked a second question. Sorry, what's the second question? I can't remember.
Okay, the second question is when participants agree to participate because of financial benefits or maybe it's linked to government things, and how do we control it?
Yes. And it's all about education. It just falls down to education. It's the same thing, the way Nigerians go to vote because of the money. Whatever money, because they know it doesn't make a difference. Or they feel it doesn't make a difference wherever they vote. So let me just take the money. It's education. And maybe I keep referring to this because we have seen it in NHVMAS. We have seen it happen. We have seen it. That once the gatekeepers are educated, it changes the trajectory completely. It changes and the people benefit from it. So having said that, please note also, I'm from a school of thought that says, look, once all the stakeholders do the things they do, it reduces the risk. If the ethics committee are trained and they do what they're supposed to do, they would have reduced the risk of that protocol to the minimum possible. So if somebody out of wanting money and the research offers money, I can assure you not all research offers money, and they go because of the money, at least people have the IRB has ensured that research is at the minimum risk possible. So if they bring money, take it. Yeah, because that is why you must check for the ethics clearance. Where's the ethics clearance? The ethics clearance, you get it, oh, this has gone check. If you're the gatekeeper, you check the protocol and be sure that it is okay. If it's not okay, query the ethics committee. How can you give this kind of approval? See, there's no minimum risk. And we have done it before. In fact, in 2 cases, I remember one in Lagos, one in Ife. And when they went to check it, they found out that the researcher wasn't using the right protocol. It wasn't using the protocol they approved. So that is why you have the voice to speak up. Thank you. Expert.
Thank you.
Expert, yes. Expert. Your participants are not using their names. They are using...
Sorry, it's a mistake due on my computer. I'm Fogito from Cameroon. Thank you for using me. Prof. Moronik, I just follow your presentation, which is very interesting. I have a few questions. Sorry, I'm a francophone, so I'm trying to...
Je parle français un peu.
Je sais, Professor Moronik. Let's see. Okay. What is the most important principle of research according to you? Because that is important. The other questions are related to the culture, our culture. We know we are in Africa, and how the cultural difference can affect research ethics. Okay. The third and last one is about the actuality, how we are now. We are hearing about the AI, and I want to know what are the ethical implication of AI and data driven in the research today. Thank you.
Excellent question. Excellent questions. When you ask about the most important principles, for me, all the 4 are intertwined. There's not one of the 4. Respect for persons and communities. That respect for communities is an angle that is brought in because of the African context. Normally in the global north, it's just respect for persons because they're individualistic in their own system. In our own system, we all recognize that we are communitarians. We live as a community. And that is why that principle was adjusted for Africans, noting the nature of the community. And therefore, for African researchers, when you're writing your protocol and for ethics committee and for you, you must address the element of community. I would be glad to share on the platform where you are about the experiences of how that played out in COVID very well, where the bioethicists on the African continent made the case for the use of the stepwise research design rather than the randomized control design. And that design has been adopted, even in COVID, that was used because of recognition of the communitarian nature of the African population. So it does. That is the one element that takes cognizance of the culture. Another element that takes care of the culture, which I'm already answering your second question, is the informed consent process. Once again, the global north is an individualistic community, but in the global south, like Africa, we recognize that if I'm going to take part in research, I'm going to take permission. A wife is going to say, I'm going to talk to my husband. You don't, a child cannot just wake up and say, I'm going to research, it's going to get the parents involved. So in that context, there's an element called assent. When I talked about the assent earlier, I was talking about it for the child. But in the African context, there is a place for getting assent from the partners. So if I'm a wife, I want my husband involved, I get assent from him, but his assent does not override my consent. It is my consent that will take me into the research, not the assent of the partner. So that's another adaptation of the Nigerian context, of the African context to research implementation, addressing the principles. Okay, so those cultural differences, that's why you must look at it and work as a nation and work together actively to contextualize the principles. So there are principles that say no harm. Okay, so that is non-maleficent. And I gave an example in the context of northern and southern Nigeria. If I design a research for southern Nigeria where male doctors are examining female participants for their sexual and reproductive health, it's not an issue. Nobody even thinks about it. But in the north, you can't design a research and a male doctor is examining a female reproductive system. No. So that's taking culture into context. Okay. So the principle is do no harm. The implementation in this sense means that the design of sexual reproductive health examination in the southern Nigeria would differ from northern Nigeria. And that's why you must be in that space to say, oh, this is the context, this is how it can be applied. Otherwise, you will stimulate people. Otherwise, you will change things. For example, there was a big global research I was involved with, and they were going to draw 25 mils of blood. And the community person said that I think it was Uganda, that no, in my community, they're going to scream, oh, you can't take 25 mils of blood. And the researchers had to go back. You know that they went back and were able to design the implementation of their research to answer that question with 7 mils rather than 25 mils. And then the community today were able to say, yes, 5 to 7 mils is very small. But 25, no, they're not going to agree. So these are the context of the community that you as civil society will bring on board. And then you ask the final question about AI and ethics. It's a big field and it's a new and evolving field. It's a lot to learn about how it applies right now in terms of ethics. I know a lot around the research reporting and research management. I am not grounded in AI and this application of what it means to interpret for you as community members. If there are specific questions, I can read around and come back and share, and anybody else can read around and come back and share. But yes, it's an evolving issue. I'm grounded in an issue as a researcher, but I need to be grounded in the issue as a community advocate. Thank you for the brilliant questions. Over.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
Can I-
so very much. So in the absence of any other question, I
No,
think we
I
just
want
have
to.
somebody
want
wants to talk, ask again?
Me again, yes, me again. It's me again. It's Folk. My
Okay,
name
do
is
that quickly
Yes.
so we can take.
It's a comment as a question due to
Okay.
what you just say. So what is so just you just mentioned about the difference between northern countries and our context really relate to my question, which is also a comment because recently in some African country like mine, Cameroon, there
Yeah.
have been movement advocating for laws to allow adolescent health screening without parental consent. And I'm thinking, I want to ask you, what do you think about this from an ethical perspective?
I'm sure we also, there are pros and cons. Remember also that change has to happen with things. For example, in Nigeria, nobody came from the global north to move this agenda for us in Nigeria. I'm sure Florita would also share experience how we worked with the Nigerian system. And in 2014, I can't remember the war where we got the point where we moved for adolescents to give
I think age of consent for reproductive health research.
Yes. Was it 2014 or 20 or later? So, but we got it to the point that the government wrote it became a government position. I mean, it wasn't a one-day thing. It was a long work. But what we got was that children up to the age 14 and above, rather than the initial 18 and above, we got it to 14, where adolescents age 14 and above can freely give consent to participate in research that was non-invasive. Once it's a sexual and reproductive health research that is invasive, that means you want to give implants, you want to do an operation, then that was the line we drew. It has to be parental consent. But when it's 14 and above, otherwise, we know that they're already involved in sex. We even have people that are 9-year-old that are married, many, not one, in Nigeria. And then you say that they should be going to get parental consent for answering sexual and reproductive health questions. That becomes a limitation. But we moved us down to 14. There are other countries that are 12, but we moved us down to 14 because at 14, there's evidence to show that they have cognitive reasoning enough to answer that question, understand the risk and benefits, and be able to give valid consent to participate without the intrusion of the parents that will limit them to participate in sexual and reproductive health. But like I said, we limited it to non-invasive sexual and reproductive health research, like questionnaire study, like, focus group discussion, rather than invasive, like giving implants. Or they can go get condoms, they can get, yes, but non-invasive. That was what we did successfully in Nigeria. Yeah. Over.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Over to you, Florita. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. Thank you once again. I checked on the participants on live stream. We do have good number, but unfortunately there is no question from the team. So we are good to conclude on this section. Thank you once again, Prof, for that wealth of experience sharing with us. Thank you. And thank you, participants, for the attention and the beautiful question that we all asked. So quickly now, we are just going to look at a case study on the Nigerian Pfizer Trovan study in Kano. We are going to look at that piece of community perspective on ethics. And then we ask the critical
We can't hear you. Your voice is lost, please. Thank you.
question.
I think she has
I don't hear you.
challenges. Just hold on, hold on. We've lost her. It's internet access challenge, so
Okay.
just hold on, yes. Thank you. Apologies. Apologies, just hold on. I think we have to deal with we'll have to deal with the internet. Um, Richard, are you there? Richard, are you there? Give me a minute. Let me look. All right. When she comes back on board, I think the problem is with the internet. She's been logged off from the internet. So this session is supposed to take us through a case study and enable us engage. I hope you've taken some water and refreshed a little, and then this will kick off. We're going to look at the Trovan study that happened in Nigeria and what this meant. And I'm keeping an eye on the participant list so that when she comes back, she can then continue to take the case study. So what happened with the Trovan case study in Nigeria? And what does this mean, even going beyond Pfizer and in our current practice? Or what are the lessons we learned? Every single one of you on this call will have to answer to the question. So let's look at Trovan. What happened then was that Nigeria was a regular point of outbreak for meningitis. It was endemic. Every year, it was a seasonal problem. Meningitis was a problem in Nigeria. And it was a problem in northern Nigeria. It happened every year then. And what happens in the global enterprise? Of course, you can have vaccines to prevent meningitis. We do have vaccines. But once again, Africa does not produce its vaccine. Africa produces 1% of the vaccines, all its vaccines that it uses. And therefore, the global north always rations the vaccine available to you. It then rations, even at this time, meningitis-related vaccines at the time when there's an outbreak, so that the vaccines are used to protect the people in the environment of the outbreak, such that they don't get infected. That's a very poor way to live. But that's how we've lived. And so when there's meningitis, people come, Red Cross will come, Moon and Star will come. Everybody is coming as humanitarian services to help Nigeria. And of course, it's only at the time, you only vaccinate where there's a problem and then you leave. There is no pandemic planning, despite the regular occurrence. And then in 1996, an event happened, another case happened. And of course, everybody came again. Everybody came again to support, like all over the world. And one of the people that came this time was Pfizer. But this time, maybe they've been doing it before, but this time Pfizer left an indelible mark. That epidemic was bad, and 15,000 people died from meningitis that year. Of course, meningitis is many children. What did Pfizer do? At the peak of the epidemic, Pfizer came and offered his support. And you'll see the kind of support. This happens all the time, even through NGOs and CSOs. People come, they offer support. And what they're doing is collecting data. I remember once at my university, I remember the study that the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology was launching. They were doing cervical cancer, but they were offering it free as an NGO thing, and they were doing molecular study. I wrote on that platform, I said, this is not a free service. This is research. Of course, I was abused and named and said, look, I'm stopping research. I said, this is data collection. You cannot be doing molecular study as a free thing. Research is not possible. It's research. And you know what the paradigm shift of, I mean, I was named. Of course, these things come with money. Maybe they gave the department money. What then happened? The ethics, the departmental head then now came for one of the annual conferences. You know, we hold an annual conference. And then he came to meet me at the back after the keynote speech. And he came and met me. Almost hugged me, said, Morenike, this was what you were talking about. This was what you were talking about. Of course, I didn't say a word. The deed had been done. The damage had been done. But this is the kind of thing that happened with Pfizer. Pfizer came on an humanitarian ground to help Nigeria during the peak of the epidemic. They offered to give free drugs. But what they were actually doing was to test the safety of Trovan in the treatment of meningitis. What they did was select 100 children for the experimental group and the rest for the control. And they gave these 100 children untested, unproven antibiotics, which is Trovan. This Trovan drug had not been tested among sick children before now. It hasn't gone through phase 1, it hasn't gone through phase 2, it hasn't gone through phase 3. They just came in the time of trouble and saw free grounds. That was what happened. And you know the worst thing? When you do a clinical trial, you will compare the intervention drug with what is on ground to be treated. There are no treatments for meningitis before then. The known treatment was ceftriaxone. Apologies, I'm not a medical doctor, but that was the antibiotics that were administered. So that Trovan can prove that its drug was working. It had Trovan on the control arm, and then the control capacity, the control group were receiving low dose of the treatment drug. Low dose. In that trial, 11 children died. Others developed brain damage. Others became deaf. Others developed partial paralysis. What did children do? Once they finished their data, they collected their data, parachutes researchers, and left. The ones that, of course, they never received an ethics approval. In 1996, there was no way they received an ethics approval in Kano because there was no ethics committee in Kano. So what happened? Years later, the journalist opened the case. It was a journalist, it wasn't a researcher, that raised the noise about the unethical trial. They identified that patients were not informed about the research. Based on that, in August 2020, 30 research published from London, Nigeria, where it happened, instituted a court case. They alleged that Pfizer violated the Durable Code, the Declaration of Helsinki, the Article 7 of the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, and the FDA regulation, because they did not collect consent for participants' participation. They also did things wrong in their design, including the fact that they did not follow the FDA regulations, which is the country that hosts them at Pfizer. So these are the controversial questions. Who approved the trial? Why wasn't Nigeria chosen for the trial? How were the subjects recruited? Who signed consent form? Who benefits from the trial? And what measures are in place to minimize this? Before we move on to the next issue, I don't know if there's anybody that wants to, I'm going to call you this time. Anybody that wants to discuss these issues? Anybody that have thoughts about these issues? Florita, do you want to take over from here?
Yes, ma. Thank you so very much. Thank you. I sincerely appreciate. Sorry for that technical challenge. So that's really where we are. We could see a clear breach of ethical protocols, happening in Nigeria by Pfizer, a top pharmaceutical company that everybody look up to. And the way they came in the disguise that they are helping in such a disturbing situation of high rates of meningitis in Kano. And we saw what happened. Everybody flew with Pfizer, the medical director, the nurses, and everyone. And they even consented to dropping a known drug that had been documented to help people with meningitis. They gave them a lower dosage that could not offer any kind of therapeutic effect. So we want to look at it. I know we have participants from Kano as well, on this platform. So let's look at it critically. Who approved the trial? From the conversation we have had so far since morning, we know that we're supposed to have a functional ethics committee that would have looked at the protocol, the study design and everything, and be sure that there is minimal risk to approve it. So at this point, who approved the trial? And the answer is there was no approval, because it's ethics committee that's supposed to approve. And at that time, there was no ethics committee. But the question we want to ask, and I want us to look at it critically, is something that happened in a hospital. Who manages hospital? We have the directors, right? The CMD, Chief Medical Director. So could it be possible that Pfizer will enter the hospital and offer these drugs without the medical director, the hospital management team being aware or being intimated of that study? Can we have people contribute on this? Okay, no hand is up yet. All right, so
let me call them. Abdul.
All right.
Abdul,
All right.
Abdul Tisinkano, would you please unmute your mic and respond? Abdul, are you there? Yeah.
Hello,
Thank
hello,
you.
hello. Good morning,
Hello.
good afternoon.
Sorry,
All
sorry, some of us did not get the question, please.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Repeat the question, please.
Okay, so we are looking at the Pfizer trial, the Trovan Pfizer trial in Kano among children that caused a whole lot of harm, and taking the history of how that study was carried out, we find out that it didn't go through the ethical process of getting approvals. It didn't follow a ethically acceptable study design, and it caused harm instead of benefit to the participants. So we are now having a holistic review of this study and then use it to learn what happened in the past and then be able to fortify ourselves moving forward so that we don't have such a repeat in our communities. So we are asking, if there was no ethics approval as at 1996 when that incident happened, who actually approved this trial for Pfizer people? For Pfizer as a company, who approved it? What's your own take on this?
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, go ahead.
Yeah. So in my humble opinion, I think I think the gist of the whole thing was the research was not properly conducted, and even if it was conducted, they did not pay attention to what the target audience has to see, as in the information that was supposed to be valuable for that particular implementation that was supposed to be obtained from, let's say, the gatekeepers, was not put into consideration. I think from my own little understanding, I think if I can infer, I would safely say that could be one of the factors. Thank you.
Thank you. Abubakar M. Abubakar. What's your take? Are you with us or in spirit? Abubakar, can you unmute?
Hello. Hello.
Okay, go ahead. Okay.
So my own opinion, I just look like during that time we have a large number for the people for meningitis on that. So I think the medical personnel in the facility, those people people just give the chance to starting using that vaccination. Also, that's this time now in Kano, Ministry of Health has a board they call Human Resources board. So whatever research now you are going to carry in Kano, you must go and register with these people first and know your questionnaire and know what you are going to carry before going to do any assignment in the state. So that's it now. That's my own little contribution.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you. All right. So the next question is looking at why was Nigeria chosen for the trial? You see, most people who do not want to follow the standards, even we as CSO, we are also guilty of this. Most people who do not want to follow the ethical standard, they look at opportunity. So for Nigeria, as the last speaker has said, there was a serious outbreak of meningitis. Had so many children and people were dying. So they felt that at this point, the country is overwhelmed. If we launch with this opportunity, I think we're going to get a hearing here. We're going to get the space to do our trial. And they actually tapped in and it worked for them. So the same thing applies to us, even as CSOs. We have people that so much trust us. They so much trust us. And once we present ideas or issues to them, they just accept it without looking back. And we often launch that opportunity to push on ethical conduct of research among these communities. And it's not right. I remember then when I was working as a counselor and HIV tester. So I had a large pool of people living with HIV. That's as far back as 2004, 2005, that we still have the issue of people doing their CD4 count before they are enrolled on treatment and all that. I know so many herbal dealers that came to me with all their rhetorics and convincing evidence that their herbal medication have cured so many people living with HIV. I should link them with my pool of people living with HIV. And I know I had so many pools, and I know a lot of them that used to call me then and say, Florita, please, anywhere you hear of any cure, let me know. But because of my exposure to research ethics in the days of microbicide research, I knew that that is not the standard of cure. I had asked those people, are you willing to present your formula for clinical trial? Go to NIMA, present your formula for clinical trial. And if it works, it even pay you more than coming from the backyard to ask for clients. So see, this Pfizer trial should open a more wide eye for us to look at things in depth and guide ourselves before we become the gatekeeper that opens door for unethical research in our community. The CMD, the healthcare workers, they didn't really understand what they were giving into. And maybe they didn't even have the in-depth knowledge around ethics. There was that gap then, and they consented to it. Or maybe they gave them some package, you never can tell. There could be some envelope that is change hands, and they didn't really think about the health implication of giving approval to that kind of study. What about the parents? In our culture, children are underage. Before they give consent, you must get the consent of the parents. But the question here is that for this meningitis, the parents saw it as opportunity for them to get care. There is therapeutic misconception in our country. So they saw it as opportunity. What is their own? So no consent was actually obtained from the parents of these kids. They didn't even understand it was a research. They saw it that some people have come to help them come out of the problem of meningitis. And some of these things are still happening, even among us. What is the benefit of the trial to the participant, the children? The benefit is zero. Pfizer wanted to sell their Trovan drugs at all possible means. And you can see how crafty they are in the design. They lower the dosage of the ceftriaxone so that their own Trovan will have a superiority test. When you're testing new drugs, you test it with an existing drug, and you want to test for superiority. Is it operating at the same level? Is it more superior to what we already know? They lower that one so that they can get data that will confirm that Trovan is more superior. But thank God they were exposed. And the question is, what measure do you think we can put in place to minimize future occurrence of this kind of study? So I keep the floor open now for us to contribute again. What do you think we could have done differently so that we don't have this type of incidents in our communities again?
Hello, ma. Good afternoon. Sorry, I'm coming again.
Okay.
Regarding what you are saying now, I'm seeing for some of the hospital now. If you enter, you can see a pharmaceutical company coming to the facility and advertise their own drugs. They are not going to a medical officer for the hospital or the medical doctor for the hospital. They are just going directly to the pharmacies and show them where they drugs that they have, and also just give them the market, how they are going to sell it. So how we are going to do with those kind of pharmaceutical people? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know how this works out, but when I was in clinical practice, if you see a doctor, after the consultation with a doctor, there is a prescription. And with that prescription, you go to the hospital pharmacy, who now interpret the doctor's prescription and give you your drugs and educate you how to use it. So if we now have pharmaceutical companies move straight to the pharmacy department of a hospital and share their drugs with them for them to dispense to the patient, that's a very big breach. That's a very big breach. But if it is that they come to the clinic to advertise their drugs, and then expecting people to go out in the pharmacy stores or drug stores and ask for those drugs, that's another ballgame entirely. But even at that, there has to be a regulation in terms of who do you allow into the clinic to advertise for products. How are you sure that those products are working? What is the efficacy? What data is available? Because once they advertise this type of product in a hospital setting, of course, the patients we have, their mindset is that, oh, the hospital already know these people. So these things are good. That's why the hospital have allowed it, into the institution for them to come and sell it. So I think it requires advocacy and conversation with the hospital management in things like this. But above all, having ethics committee do the right thing. Having ethics committee do the right thing can make a whole lot of difference. But again, sometimes they sneak in to do these studies without the ethics committee knowing. And that is where our civil society organization will come in as watchdogs. We come in as watchdogs. There was a time in Lagos State, they were doing, I think it was one of these events, is it World Day or International Women's Day? It's one of these days, and they came in to offer HIV testing. And in that HIV testing, this time around, they were using urine as specimen. Urine was the specimen, but they were also collecting blood. For every four urine tests they did, they collected the blood. So they would do both blood and urine. My colleague went for that program. So she came back and she said, Flora, also using urine as the specimen. For every 4 tests, they collect both blood and urine to test it. I was laughing. I told her that they are doing a clinical trial. They are trying to find out the efficacy of a HIV test kit that uses urine. He said, but they didn't tell anybody that it was a trial. They told people that they are doing free tests. So this in our organization then, and I mentioned it to Professor Morenike, and she said, I need to write them and ask them, what exactly are they doing? If actually it's a clinical trial. So controlling these things require us as civil society organization to be watchdog, pay attention, put your ears down, know what is happening, and be able to speak up. Some of the people that are engaged in this type of studies, they are often voiceless. So we will be their voices. Okay, so the floor is still open. What more can we do to minimize this type of occurrence?
Hello.
Please, I need everybody to talk. We need to generate everything we can do.
Hello, good afternoon.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay, good afternoon, Favor.
Let's take Amma first. Amma, then Favor.
Okay, Amma.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so when I was being taught about this Trovan trial carried out in Kano, I was taught that the measures put in place to minimize harm was actually criticized because it was weak and it was inadequate, right? So moving forward for me, in terms of what should be done going forward, I'm trying to prevent the repeat of this kind of situation. The key lesson is that emergency conditions must never remove ethical protections. Just like we've been taught, first, any clinical trial must undergo strict and truly independent ethical review before it begins. Through recognized bodies such as hospital ethics, I'm sure there's a committee that they set aside for that. And again, the national regulators, like the NAFDAC, National Agency for Food and Drug Administration Control. Then secondly, I think informed consent must be properly documented and explained in simple languages, because when dealing with vulnerable populations like children and parents under distress, you have to be like careful. You have to, break this thing down into simple English, into simple terms that these children and these parents can understand. And then lastly, there should be strong international and national monitoring during any of these trials, including independent data safety monitoring boards that can stop the study immediately if harm is detected, and then the government should strengthen laws so that some of these foreign pharmaceutical companies cannot operate outside strict local control, even during emergencies. So I feel like going forward, Nigeria and other developing countries also need to invest more in research ethics infrastructure, training of ethics committees, and then enforcement of mechanisms so that approval is not just on paper, but properly implemented. Then most importantly, there must be a principle that emergencies increase ethical responsibility rather than reduce it, meaning that the vulnerable populations should receive better protection, not weaker safeguards during all of this crisis. So that's my take on it.
Thank you so very much. This is really very great. Thank you so very much. Thank you. This is really noted. Any more contributions? Someone wanted to speak. Okay, Dami wanted to speak, or Havama said all you wanted to say? Yeah.
I think Udia Favor.
Okay, Favor.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I think Amma has given a very beautiful
Favor, go
summary.
ahead.
Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. I said Amma has given a very beautiful summary of what I intended saying.
Okay.
So
okay.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so very much. Okay, ma, let's move to the remaining part of the slides, ma. Okay, so this slide shows the clear gaps in the Pfizer-Trovan study. 1, no ethical approval obtained. No informed consent of any obtained. There is high harm benefit ratio. So it contradicts the research principle of saying more benefit and no harm. Victims were not compensated associated injury until when the parents made the sue before they were able to ask them, the court now ordered Pfizer to pay a certain amount of money to the victims. Next slide, ma'am. So what lesson did we pick from the Pfizer-Trovan study in Nigeria? Remember, we said at the time that study happened, there was nothing like ethics committee. So that study exposed to Nigeria their vulnerability, as there is no ethics committee in Nigeria. So that means studies can just come in and happen. Nobody is there to monitor, nobody is there to regulate, nobody is there to give approvals. So it also exposed the sharp practices that have been happening within the local community and also the international research partnership that could be driving that. So we saw Pfizer-Trovan study, play out, but sincerely, a lot more has happened that we didn't really notice. It's just the Pfizer trial that just exposed because there were deaths and all that. There will be pockets of sharp practices of that nature occurring across the different regions of the country, but people wouldn't know. So, but with that, it was very clear. People became very vigilant to know what is happening in the society. And for Kanu is so vigilant now because of their Trovan experience. We had a study on the administration of azithromycin to children 0 to 11 months in Kanu and other 5 other states in Nigeria. So when we went to other states, there was already collaboration, discussion, ethics approval, and all that. And it was a smooth entry and implementation process. But when the team went to Kanu, despite the conversations and all the documents that presented, the ethics approvals, all the research team flew to Kanu. And the Kanu Ministry of Health stopped the study from going on. We stayed there for almost 1 week, burning the resources in the hotels, the flights, and all that. And they said, no, we want to have a second look because we have beaten before. We don't want to be beaten again. So everybody traveled back. And after their further review and all that, they now gave approval. We flew back again to Kano. So this is the kind of impact, we get when we break ethical protocols. People lost the confidence even in the research, in the research itself, or even in the researchers. So it also raised the need for ethical consciousness in conducting research on human participants. And of course, after the Trovan study, we had the crystallization of health research ethics committees in institutions that were universities, teaching hospitals, tertiary institutions in Nigeria. Next slide. So we do have the National Research Ethics Code, and that code is also consistent with the International Ethics Code, like the Declaration of Helsinki and the SIOMS, and all of them, both our National Ethics Code and the International Ethics Code, address the issue of standard of care. No matter how important the data we think we are interested in, or the research question we want to answer, we must not compromise the standard of care. We must not compromise the standard of care. We cannot withdraw what we know that can help a client because we want to find out if B works or not. It is unacceptable. And if you look at the current HIV prevention studies, they can never do a placebo study again because you can't get people and prevent them from accessing what have been known to work. The standard of care says offer them all that is available to help them in their situation, to help them in preventing risk. You must not withdraw that from them. If you do that, you're compromising the standard of care. So the ethics research, our National Ethics Research Code addresses that. Trials to address the issue of intellectual property rights, what is owned after the study concludes. So we find situations where studies are concluded in Nigeria, they carry the data. In fact, they even carry some of our specimens, the blood, the tissue, everything. They ferry it outside the country. So there is a joke that we used to make that sometimes we'll be surprised one day somebody will publish a data and tell Florida, your father is not your father. Oh. You are from another descendant. From us. So that we need to define who owns what should leave the country, what should be within our own custody, who owns the data. Are we just data? All these things need to be addressed, and the ethics code also discusses that. And of course, there is a principle that guides the transfer of data as well as the samples. But oftentimes, our researchers defy these principles and they consent to taking all these samples out of the country instead of them to even negotiate to say, can you bring that machine? Can you bring the technology into the country so that we can do this genome? We can do this genome study in country. That way you uplift the standard of practice in your country rather than all the time consenting to transfer all data and samples outside the country. So if civil society also understand the concept of data and samples transfer, we can put our voice to say we want to uphold our own data and samples in country. So we push for technology transfer rather than data and samples transfer. Next slide, ma'am. So laypersons, our civil society organizations, we are also laypersons. So we could be in our ethics committee, we could also operate. We do have roles to play on the ethics committee. Beware that unethical research still possible. That's me, I don't want to confuse myself and say, we have trained enough. NHVMAS co-research is still happening, even very close to our nose. So we need to guide against this as civil society organization. We must be conversant with the ethical guidelines and ensure that the implementations of the protocols are as reviewed. So we have been told to ask that most important questions. Do you have ethics approval? We have a lot of advocates we have trained who come back and tell us, The researcher came to our community. We asked him, where is their ethics approval? That was the end. We didn't see them again. So it's because that advocate is empowered. He understands the ethical principles. So we need to ask. And sometimes when you also ask for this ethics approval, they will tell you yes, that they have ethics approval. You can ask for the protocol. You have a right to have access to the protocol, at least an abridged form of the protocol that says A, B, C are things that need to be done. And then you can be able to go to the field and say, is it ABC that is being done? Because sometimes they write all the beautiful notes and get the approvals from the ethics committee. But when it now comes to implementation, they do completely different things. So as watchdogs, we'll be able to, get that. We'll be able to monitor that and ensure that the protocols are complied with. Also, the rights and privileges of trial participants and communities where the researches are being conducted are addressed, especially for the vulnerable communities, We have a lot of violence, the homophobia situation in Nigeria. So if somebody wants to do a research among the MSM and is not considering the safety of that population, as advocates, you should be able to voice out. It's not you collecting this data. What happens after? What happens after their study? You will carry your data and go, and the participant can no longer stay in their community. We saw the example that Prof gave. Is that research jeopardizing people? So we must look at it from its contextual situation and be able to make that decision, whether that research is really protecting the rights of participants and the community or not. And then we'll be able to engage with the researchers to profile solution. Next slide. So the factors that are driving unethical conduct of research, we say ignorance. Ignorance on the part of the researcher, ignorance on the part of the regulatory bodies, ignorance on the part of the community watchdogs, because the people that are supposed to safeguard the community, they are also not aware. But sometimes I personally argue around the issue of ignorance, because we have people who have been trained, who have been exposed to ethics training, and yet they cut corners. So it seems as if it's in us to cut corners, not that sometimes we don't know. Imagine someone that is doing her master's program is not willing to get ethics approval, is not willing to write protocol, he wants to cut corners to do the research. But ethics is a paramount topic that is being taught in the master's program, and yet we cut corners around it. Some of us stay under the tree. We stay under the tree to generate our research questions, generate our responses, and write up all our topics and submit. So it's about having that commitment to maintain research integrity, even beyond the issue of ignorance. Also, the issue of poverty. The society we are in now, our economy is not good. So poverty continues to promote unethical ethics research conduct. In the most recent time, we hear people are selling their kidney. I'll be asking, how are they making this decision from the informed angle, or is it being driven by poverty? But we hear that every day. Do they understand the additional risk that is imposed when they just have one kidney? Sometimes they have a third party who even share that money with them for selling their kidneys. So poverty remains an issue. There is also corruption of officials. The body that have been invested with the responsibility of regulating research and protecting the rights and safety of participants, they are often compromised. If you look at people, if they want to submit ethics approval, if they want to submit their protocols, they want to look at the ethics committee where they have friends. Abimbola is in this ethics committee, I will submit there, she will help me. They are not looking at maintaining the standard and allowing their protocol to pass through thorough review. They look at places that they can get that approval very fast. And more so, some of the ethics committees are not even approved by HREC. They don't do the training, they don't do their regulatory registrations and all that. They just continue to approve protocols. This is the situation we find ourselves. And also, there is also the issue of having competent personnel to review. This attached to the ethics committee themselves. But again, as community actors, we can bridge this gap when we ask critical questions for researchers that come to our communities and be able to understand clearly what are the benefits and what are the risks. And if you think the risks are not really minimal for your community to bear, you can begin to blow the whistle. This has been done in the past. There was a research that was happening in South Africa. They noticed that people were having some side effects. They started blowing the whistle. They found out that they are doing the research and new prevention products that can protect participants were available, the oral PrEP, but they were not willing to integrate the oral PrEP. Their interest was mainly to collect their data from the participants. And advocates, civil society organizations, they started shouting, no, this research cannot continue to go on. You must offer people PrEP. Look for a way to provide the oral PrEP to protect the participants. And of course, things change. So the civil society organization, they are very powerful tools that can support the ethics committee in bridging gaps. We must continue to position ourselves to be able to do this. Okay, next one. I think we are. Okay, thank you so very much. So that's the case study. But our take home is for us to look back in our community. Pay attention to your community or take stock of what you think you have participated in the past and ask yourself, did that study go through proper ethics approval? Was it an ethical study or it was ethical study? What role did you play at that time? With this training, do you think you can still play that role? So the next time that we meet, we'll be able to get some feedback, or as we engage in our WhatsApp platform, we'll be sharing those experiences that we think we have participated in the past that were not ethical. If you are given the position based on this training, you will do something different. Thank you. So on that note, I'll call for maybe 1 or 2 contributions and then we call it a day. The floor is open if you want to make any contribution. Again.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Is okay, Kadobi from Enugu.
Okay.
Yes. I would like to sincerely express my appreciation to the organization of this training. It's really truly an honor to be given the opportunity to learn, grow, and contribute to setting ethical standards in health research within my community. This training has already begun to shape my understanding of ethical practices. In reflecting on this, I remember one of a free cervical cancer screening exercise that was conducted in my state, in my area. While the initiative appeared beneficial at that time, it raised concern as participants were not giving feedback. We were not giving feedback or results after the screening. That day was it was a mess. Everybody lie on this table, do this. You see the way they were just conducting the screening. Truly, this training has really opened my eyes to what happened that day because we were not giving results, no follow-up communication. So experiences like this can create doubt and mistrust, and they highlight the need for stronger ethical oversight and accountability in public health activities. So this reinforces the importance of what we are learning on this program. To curb such occurrences, there is a clear need for increased public awareness about ethical standards in health research, stricter regulation and monitoring of health intervention, and ensuring that all participants are fully informed and respected. Communities should also be empowered. We should be empowered to ask questions, demand transparency, and report any suspicious or unclear practice. I don't know how we can do this because that day, a lot of women, some don't even know what was happening there. We're just asking to lie down, do this like animals. Nobody was asking. We were more than 5,000 women there. Until today, when we say, what happened? I don't know if I have cervical cancer. I don't know what's happening. Till date, nobody is accountable for it. So truly, I'm really honored. I'm grateful for this opportunity. It has opened my eyes to more occurrences. Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
Yes,
Thank you.
Florita, I can add that. Thank you so much. I mean, it's very encouraging. If this is all that we're getting, it's enough for me to go and sleep. I think this is what you asked the question about. What can we do? I think this is what we are asking.
Yeah.
That not one person can answer this question. This is where you have 4 weeks for us to brainstorm together. What should we be doing? How can we do? And then over that 4 weeks, you can then implement your 2 weeks program based on the lessons we have all learned on what to do so that you can then come back and get your ES certificate. One of the things we'll also think we'll do at the end of the program is also announce, once we've done this training, we'll go and announce to NREC as well as other ethics committee around the, we have a platform. Maybe we'll add, Florita, maybe we'll add them to the platform so that people know that they are trained persons who have capacity to serve on ethics committees. I think this is the kind of thing we do. Let's go back house and go and discuss this with Benson and then Enric so that we start to project them. But what can you do? This is the question that we're going to ask ourselves. I'm sure every single person on this platform may be able to share an example of an ethical research. I can even share one today that I'm still wondering, why is this thing still happening? But, in this week, I felt it's happening because we don't have community watchdogs.
Yeah.
We are losing the community. Once we have the community watchdog, people will say, don't do it all. But it's still happening. All these big companies all over, they don't collect ethics clearance. They enter, but it's we. For 80% of them, it's we that are opening that door. It's we. But once they know there's watchdog, it's all over the world though. Once they know there's a voice, there's watchdog, everybody sits and behave. So let's think about what it means to do collectively going forward, and then we'll design these things to suit our own community, and then we can implement our 2 weeks project. Thank you. Over.
Thank you. Thank you. Any more comments so that we call it a day? I think we are really quite to our time. Congratulations, everyone. Just a few minutes to 1. Okay, so thank you so very much, Prof, for your time and your willingness to really share your wealth of knowledge and experience in this research ethics. I promise you, you're building new generation of ethicists in Nigeria. Thank you so very much. For the participants, I thank every one of you that was able to make it today. Thanks for our selected 25 participants. Also for those who joined on our live streaming on YouTube. Thank you so very much. I believe you must have learned 1 or 2 things. We look forward to more engagement. Mustafa, your hand is up. You want to say something? Gwenga Mustafa or Sugar, continue.
I was just giving a thumbs up. Because
thank you so very much.
Actually, I was part of the journalist baggage that reported on the Pfizer and all that. Thank you.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. So as we engage on our WhatsApp platform, it would be nice we share the real life experience. What was it like as you were reporting on that case? Thank you so very much. So on that note, we call it a day for today, and we look forward to another section next week, Wednesday. But meanwhile, we will continue to engage on the WhatsApp group that we created. If you have not joined the WhatsApp group, please do reach out to us and join. A link was pasted on the WhatsApp message box. But if you have not joined, as the training concludes now, please do reach out to us and we'll get you joined into the group. Thank you so very much. On that note, I say thank you and remain blessed.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.